Welcome, one and all, to the Cool Wars podcast with me, your host, David Kipping. If you are watching this on video, then you might notice something's a bit different. My background has changed, and that is because I have now moved from my normal home in New York to the UK for 1 year. So this is my sabbatical. This is actually the first sabbatical I've ever taken. It's an amazing benefit that academics get, right? So after a certain number of years of service, you kind of earn a sabbatical. And so mine has finally come around. I got tenure about a year and a half ago now, I think. And so when you get tenure, you can start to earn these sabbaticals, and you get one pretty soon after tenure. So I'm excited to be here. My goal of being in the UK is to try to build stronger collaborations and networks with many of my UK and European colleagues. There's a lot of exciting stuff happening in Europe in science, and so I want to connect back to what's happening. And I guess it's also an opportunity for you, weirdly, that if you're a fan of this podcast and you are thinking of particular people you'd like me to talk to who are in the UK or even in Europe more broadly, this is a great chance for me to actually physically sit down with them. So please do let me know down in the comments, who would you like me to talk to whilst I'm here? I certainly have a whole bunch of names that I'm excited to talk to. I'd like to try and be efficient with my time. So maybe if there's a particular university or institution I'm going to visit, maybe there'll be like 2 or 3 people I can sit down with in 1 or 2 days and bash out a whole bunch of interviews with. And certainly I was doing that actually before I left, so don't worry. We have, I think, 3 or 4 episodes pre-recorded whilst I was in the US, which was I left last month. And this is one of those episodes that we're going to talk about today. So today we have Matt O'Dowd, Professor Matt O'Dowd from Lehman College at CUNY. And, Matt O'Dowd is, of course, really famous for his work on PBS Spacetime. So I assume many of you probably know of this show already, but if you haven't, oh my goodness, go to YouTube right now and check it out. PBS Spacetime is one of the most successful, impactful, brilliantly orchestrated and presented shows about the universe that I know of. It is really the top tier, I would say, of how science communication can be done in a YouTube setting. The graphics, the visuals, the explanations, the technical detail, and of course the presentation by Matt himself, all of it is just top drawer. So it is really a pleasure to have Matt join me on this episode. I wanted to ask him all about how PBS Spacetime production works. So how does the scripting work? Where does the graphics come from? The ideas? I want to hear all about that, as well as how he balances his research, what he thinks about new experiments which are happening, such as the Rubin Observatory, which has just recently come online. So we're going to get all into that, hear about how everything works in PBS Spacetime, and learn a lot about how top-tier science communication really works, and actually hear some interesting thoughts that he has on the state of science communication on YouTube especially right now today. So please do enjoy my conversation with Matt. So you know what, you're an inspiration, Matt, to so many people in terms of expressing so clearly your joy of science and getting people motivated and interested in science. And I feel like with all these big shows like PBS Spacetime, people get a sense that they kind of know you, but really, there's so much they don't know. They only see what they see on the camera. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about your journey. Like, how did you first get inspired into physics and astronomy? How did you end up on this track?
Sure. So I grew up in a working class outer suburb of Melbourne, Australia. Big family.
I can tell
siblings.
From the accent, there's the Australia, yeah.
Yeah, as I say Australia, my accent thickens, and I remember my childhood. And, no one in my family had been to university. Mum went later in life and, finished a degree and now knows several ancient languages. And so there was always a love of knowledge and learning, but not means or even just the tradition of following these sorts of non-blue collar paths. I guess they inspired enough curiosity about the world that my older brother Paul is an avid scientist also, and we spent our childhood looking under rocks and trying to figure out how things work and
Gotta be careful doing that in
breaking
Australia.
out toys.
There's
In
all sorts-
Australia, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Many
Get bit by something.
many redback spiders
Right.
and little snakes and stuff. And then, at some point, physics captured me. I dropped out of high school actually at one point to take up an apprenticeship, to follow the proper path of suburban Aussie kid, and was not satisfied, to say the least. And so
So what age was this when you started to get this
this
bug?
was around, so I'd also, at around the same time, realized that the traditional cosmology that I'd learned as a child, which is that of Catholicism, left some questions
gaps,
wanting, and at some point I just started reading of my own accord about some of the early physicists and just this new way of engaging the world, and I just realized that, well, I have to see how far I can go in unpacking this picture, and I didn't think it would be very far, but I knew I at least had to go to uni and study some physics.
So it's all from sort of non-fiction books you were discovering.
Actually, yeah, it was really reading about just some of the crazy stuff that in quantum mechanics and some of the
which was, I guess,
holes.
the main way that science communication was actually kind of happening at that time, right? This was sort of post Sagan, but sort of pre YouTube era. So there's
it wasn't super accessible. Like, you had whatever the broadcast networks were feeding you, which was usually pretty limited. But then whatever books you stumbled on,
right.
going to libraries and things.
So what were you reading? Do you remember anything?
I went to some of the original sources. Like I don't know why, but I read some of the popular stuff that Einstein wrote, and
Okay, yeah.
But also just even encyclopedia entries. We had this physical copy of Encyclopedia Britannica at home. Back when that was what the internet was then. It was a physical copy of Encyclopedia Britannica.
Love it. Yeah. So this study you enjoyed. You went to university and you studied physics or astronomy or cosmology.
I studied physics. Yeah. So
yeah.
I did an undergrad in physics
In Australia. Yeah.
University of Melbourne.
Okay.
Did okay, I guess. And it was certainly a lot better than I expected to. I've never been like a math savant, like a lot of my colleagues are. And, so I managed to scrape through anyway and did reasonably well. And I had no idea what the world of research or physics or astrophysics was like, but astrophysics seemed cool. It seemed like a place where you could apply all of this super interesting, techniques in physics. It's the physics of everything, potentially. And so I signed up for an astrophysics undergrad research project, and then following that, finish uni, and what do I do? Do a PhD? No one does PhDs, but at that point I'd never left Australia. And like, thinking back, I realized that now one of the compelling things was that if I got into a PhD overseas,
you could travel.
Someone would pay my airfare.
Yeah.
And so I applied overseas and got a couple of offers, and they agreed to reimburse me my airfare, ultimately to the Space Telescope Science Institute in Baltimore on Johns Hopkins. And so I bought a ticket to Paris and spent 2 months getting to Baltimore to start my PhD.
That's awesome. So you started this PhD, and I guess it's interesting that actually kind of mirrors some of my own journey. Yeah, I feel like as a student, I certainly enjoyed my degree, but it was the research aspects that you only touch on really during a degree, don't you? You don't really get to dive into it as much as you'd really like. And sort of the book study stuff was fine, but it wasn't really where my heart was at. It was only when I started doing research I sort of discovered this passion. And I kind of feel like there's a mirror there that we both did physics, and it sort of diverged towards astronomy. For me, I actually felt like it was because there was just so much more to discover in space, right? In astronomy. It felt a little bit like physics had almost hit this wall where it was not a hard war, but a soft war, that if you want to make progress, it's going to take very large machines, very large teams. You can be one of 1,000. And I was always kind of more drawn to the smaller
Yeah.
team, the smaller collaborations that you can do in astronomy. Did that feature into your thinking as well, between choosing between physics and astronomy?
Maybe subconsciously, and it may have been driven by the fact that the the quantum physics, particle physics that was offered at Melbourne at the time, it just wasn't too inspiring. And I think that was because of these facts. Like, they were like very narrow problems that didn't feel like they held a lot of promise. But astronomy was and is still ramping up. We are in an increasingly golden era, I think, of discovery in astrophysics and cosmology, driven by the machines that we can now build. And,
And even software machines we can build as well.
Absolutely,
Yeah. So you ended up in Johns Hopkins, and I guess was your next trip then to New York? Your next stop in your career?
So it was an unusual PhD. The Space Telescope's not degree granting, so I was between Melbourne and Space Telescope for my PhD. Graduated, stayed in Melbourne for a little bit for a postdoc, working with I was the deputy Gemini scientist for Australia. So I was helping, facilitate Australia's interest in the Gemini telescope in Hawaii. We had a share back then. And so then it was between Hawaii and Melbourne. And then, my time in Baltimore had given me a taste for New York.
Yeah.
Baltimore is a very interesting town, but
Yeah, I've been a few times. Yeah.
But
it's not New York.
Super interesting, but good for a few years. But New York, so I always wanted to have my New York years, and so that was my expectation, that I every time a postdoc came up in New York, I would apply for it, and clearly, eventually I got one right here at Columbia University.
Back in your old digs, right? You're back home.
Working with David Sheminovich, who's like two doors down,
right?
Doing infrared galaxies, essentially, galaxy evolution and the dust between the stars. And so I was here for a couple of years, and it really was supposed to be my 2 or 3 years in New York, and then they would boot me back home, and I would presumably start a different career, because it's never been easy to get faculty positions. It's much harder now. And then the impossible happened, and I scored a position at City University of New York, Lehman College. And there I now am.
And the rest is history.
Exactly.
So then you, as I was looking at the history of PBS Spacetime, which obviously you're very well known for, and that started about 10 years ago, I think,
Right.
the show. I was kind of looking at the earliest video that appeared. It was a Super Mario video.
With Gabe, yeah.
With Gabe, yeah. So that was Gabe Perez-Giz, who was at Columbia for a bit as well, I think. Was he a postdoc as well here?
Yeah, he was working with Jan 11, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, that show was already going. I know you weren't obviously there at that time that it was beginning, but how much can you tell us about the origins of the actual show, PBS Spacetime?
Sure. So the production company, Cornham Brown, pitched a show to PBS. And they saw great need for some really solid space. It was space time. It was going to be more space and less physics to start with, I recall, but also with a stronger popular culture connection. So, and you'll see that
the Super Mario being the first video.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's a little bit like that. There's a little video game stuff. So they found Gabe. Gabe had a couple of talks online, I think, and he's incredibly dynamic and hilarious and quirky and brilliant. So they found him. I think the greatest stroke of genius was getting a real physicist / astrophysicist to do the job. And there wasn't much of that on YouTube at the time.
Yeah. People don't realize that. Thinking now, it seems common now, but then it was unusual.
Yeah, it was. So that was one of the first efforts to do that. And that was what was successful. And Gabe being, Gabe, he had brilliant ideas and wanted to do what he wanted to do. And so at some point he moved away from the video game stuff, Can You Fart Your Way to the Moon was one of them. He wanted to do an episode on tides, just how do tides form.
I know that video. I've shown that
Right.
video in my class a few times. It's a really great video because it
Yeah.
debunks so much of the common myths of how it's taught.
Yeah, it's not pulling, it's it's squeezing.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of pushback on this, but
Because it wasn't topical enough for them.
and it seemed just too niche. It seemed
Right.
too classroomy or
Okay.
something like that.
Yeah.
But it popped.
Huh.
And then Gabe wanted to teach general relativity, straight from tides to general relativity. And so he has this series of episodes where you're looking at parallel transport and like stuff that contradicted all of the deep and ancient YouTube wisdom, where YouTube has existed only for a few years at this point, and yet the wisdom was there. It has to be poppy. If it's over 3 minutes, you're dead. And so he was making these intense things that were pushing 8 minutes, which is crazy.
Because I guess that's where the reputation for PBS Spacetime being so technical maybe starts then in this journey. Because I do feel like a lot of people say to me, like, I love PBS Spacetime. I understand like half of it sometimes, but I love how deep they go. They push. Yeah.
So we definitely found a niche in that. And so Gabe had other plans. He had an NSF fellowship, and he was also a little obsessive with getting every episode like just to the T. Like he and he had a lot of trouble letting them go.
Yeah.
And so I think a combination of these things, he realized that all right, his tenure with Spacetime was up and wanted to explore other things. And so there was a little bit of a scramble in the New York community of friends of Gabe for because particularly
so you knew Gabe personally, I guess, because you were both at Columbia.
Because he was at the American Museum of Natural History quite a lot, participating in some of our undergraduate research programs and stuff like that. So we knew Gabe, and we knew that particularly as astrophysicists, we're all
it's a small world.
Well, it's a small world, yeah. And more than other physicists, we have a deep appreciation, I think, of science communication, and presumably that's thanks to Carl Sagan. And so there was a scramble. People, realized that there was this chance to do something a little bigger. And for whatever crazy reason, I ended up,
Did you audition, or how did that actually work?
It was a sort of, we went to meet Andrew Kornhaber and Eric Brown in their, what was at the time a Manhattan studio. Crazy to think that. We now shoot at my house. And, we just had a chat. And I think they did put me in front of the camera to read something. I don't remember what it was. And I honestly don't know what they saw, because I was really bad on camera. The first episode of Spacetime that we shot, like I wrote it was this dark matter episode. And I went in to shoot it, and it took like 8 hours to shoot this 10-minute video, because Andrew would just make me do every line again. And, I didn't know why, but I do now. He was trying to get me comfortable on camera and get me just to try different things and to not be a complete robot. They say that. What is it, that the camera adds 10 pounds of weight and subtracts 10% of personality? It's more than 10% of personality. So I came back next week with the next script to shoot it, and Andrew's like, you have to do the first one again.
Oh, you wrote the script?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
wow.
So I've written, I've co-written all of them, but with others leading in some cases. But for the first several years, it was me. And
so you really hired as a writer and presenter at that point. Yeah, it was almost like your entire show, and they were just supporting you.
And that was the point of hiring a scientist to.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I had to completely redo that entire thing because it was unwatchable. So,
but I think that's true of every YouTuber. It's a little bit strange in your circumstance that there was a whole crew there, and there's all this production, and they have a few years of experience already, given the history of PBS. And you look at any YouTuber when they're beginning, like MKBHD, like you look at his old videos, and he always likes to highlight how bad he was in his first few. And I feel exactly the same way in my own videos. The first few Cool Wars videos are just, I can't watch them. They're so cringy.
Yeah,
like,
no, we are not trained for this stuff.
no, but that's the only way. The only way to develop the skill is
Yeah.
to just keep practicing, keep doing it. And doing it in front of camera is, it's like an actor on the stage. Like you have to be on stage to actually get that experience and improve. So I guess that once you started really doing it, you kind of found your groove more and more as you.
Yeah, I mean, I found tricks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What kind of tricks?
So I have a friend who's a competitive improv, actor. I mean, he has a lot of things, and he gave me a couple of pointers that were so simple. One is just, when you're looking at this black camera screen, imagine someone specific, like not just a person. Imagine someone specific, your mum, your girlfriend, whatever, your 5-year-old nephew, and talk to them. Okay, and that really blew it open. Then I could really express. And the other tip he gave me, which was fun, is just pretend that you are someone. Pretend that you are the president of the United States or Werner Heisenberg or just anyone. And the cool thing about that is it's not clear to others who you're trying to channel. Mm-hmm. What they get is just that something is happening and it's interesting. So
you kind of embody a bit more confidence, I guess, when you do that.
Yeah. And just more embodiment of your, of the script and of your words. So it's just a way to get connected, I guess. So a couple little tricks, and then it gets internalized. And
well, good tricks for anyone who's starting out to keep those in mind. So when I think of the show, I think of three things. I think of this incredible depth and technical detail in the episodes, the incredible production value, the visuals, the explainers, the graphics are just really, really top notch. And then, of course, your own delivery is so professional and calming, almost meditative sometimes. You often have your hands kind of down here, and it almost looks like you're almost like in a kind of Zen-like state when it just really works. So I want to ask you all three of those parts. We touched on the third one a little bit already, but let's start with the research for the videos. Like how are topics chosen for the videos? What does the research look like and the scripting? Tell us a little bit behind the scenes of that process.
Okay. So when I'm writing it on my own, well, I guess there are two types of episode. One is let's find a new cool thing that we haven't done before, and those can be newsy, or they can be just a cool topic that at this point it's getting harder and harder to find them, and then I just read and read and read and read and just try to.
What are you reading? You're reading the papers or
sure. Uh-huh. The first thing is I go to Wikipedia, all right?
Yeah.
And
just see what's the broad view.
Get the broad view, but then the easiest thing is just find the review papers and read a lot of introductions to papers. Okay, so you get this little taste of the landscape of the field and make sure one thing that I try to be reasonably careful about is just being comprehensive. So not leaving huge gaps that I don't want to be embarrassed when I'm talking to someone from that field. That's like a very strong motivator.
Academics have that fear deeply because you'll get emailed, right? You will get an email from them saying, why didn't you?
In both directions, yeah. So that's a strong driver, and I think it's served well. Like not that everyone knows whether I've properly represented a field, but I feel like there's a vibe if I have, and so not wanting to be embarrassed in front of actual professionals in that field. So get reasonably comprehensive, and then I just kind of do a rough outline and then start writing. And often the writing will cause the direction of it to change, and there's iteration. And
so the actual topic, the topic you are choosing, yourself as well based off what you're hearing? And is there a team of pitchers who are like bouncing ideas off of you, or is it
No.
all just sort of in your head?
That's the other type of episode we do. So if it's just me, it's just me. I come up with the topic. There was a period where there was a lot more back and forth with the producer and even with PBS, but at this point, there's trust.
They just leave you to it.
There's trust.
It does, because I think from the outside you might get the impression that it's this highly polished, and it is very highly polished and produced thing, and so there's this huge team, and maybe I know there's some other science communicators and they almost just sort of show up, read what they're given, and that's kind of it. But it sounds like you're more in the authentic branch of what I think of what YouTube being, where we do basically all the work. Like there's no one here right now, right? There's no team with me. There's just me and you in a room together recording. Right. And I feel like that's sort of the true origin of YouTube. And it feels like it's fascinating to hear you do so much of that heavy lifting on the research, but also a huge amount of work for you to do all that. Yeah,
sure. I mean, it's easier now, but it is a lot and probably too much. So at a certain point, we started working with writers, and so then I found that it's always better for the writer to pitch because I need them to be passionate about it, and I need them to care and to be sure that they have the knowledge. And so we found various people, and some of the best people are grad students actually in physics. We have some people at all levels on the science journalism side. We have faculty who, like physics and astronomy faculty, who do amazing jobs also. But they're also very busy. So
and what's this lead time look like? Like the moment you start researching, choosing a topic to it actually filming, what's that gap?
I mean, we were releasing every week for a long time. Now we release twice a month. And so that's how much time we have. We used to have 1 week, now we have 2 weeks.
Yeah. So it's in series. It's not like you have parallel projects running.
It would be better if it was more parallel, but
yeah,
we have things that are in sort of the inception phase, but the writing has rarely started before the previous one is finished.
That's intense. That's an intense schedule. Yeah.
Yeah, it's intense, and we're working on ways to make it better. Yeah. So we're often reaching out to aspiring science writers or physicists and astronomers who want to try their hand.
Okay, so this gets to my second question about the visuals then, because they're always so mind-blowingly beautiful. There's obviously some graphic artists working with you to do that, especially when you were doing one a week. That must have been, and you were first few days, presumably you weren't even quite sure what you were going to say because you were still working on the research and the scripting. So they probably only had a couple of days sometimes.
Also, their week of work doesn't overlap with my week of work. So when I'm writing, they're animating the previous one.
Okay.
So they do have a week, but it's a different week. But I mean, it gets a lot messier than that in general. So we have a lead animator, Leo, who's been doing it for several years now. Prior to that, we went through animators more quickly. And, we had some really wonderful ones. Leo, however, is fantastic and very streamlined. And so the process is I write a script and then write detailed graphic notes, or I work with a writer on a script and the graphic notes get in there, and Andrew also does a lot of that work. And then the graphic notes have to be pretty precise. Okay, so there's a lot of mock drawings, animations. I have this keynote folder of mock animations for Spacetime that from the very beginning, it was like, over 1,000 pages of keynote animations now. And just because, Leo is a fantastic graphic artist, but he's also not a physicist. And so there's this back and forth between us. He does a first version and he does them piece by piece, and we, feedback and
then you review those intermediate things. Right. Yeah. Okay. And then finally, in terms of the presenting, we talked about this a little bit already, but what are you, what are you channeling? Like, who do you imagine you're talking to? You mentioned that you're imagining someone behind the camera. Like,
Yeah.
who's your target audience in your mind that you're speaking to? And, who are the inspirations that sort of guide your style or inform your style of presenting?
Yeah. So the literal imagining someone behind, I don't need to do that anymore. Or maybe I'm doing it and I'm not conscious of it.
But you're still speaking to
Yes,
an audience in mind.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, I think the idea of this show was to talk to smart people who are not explicitly educated in this area, and this was the gap I think that we saw in what was available. So by that stage, people had been consuming let's make science fun media for decades, and they had graduated from that school, and that there was nothing else, unless you want to go straight to the academic papers. So that's who they are. They're people who are, they could go to school for this stuff if they wanted to, I mean, or not, but they're curious and able to hold a few thoughts in their head at once, but we try to aim at people who can get it even if they have to watch it twice, but don't have the vocab and all of the technical training. And so that's kind of it. We are not afraid to put complex concepts, but we're very careful about jargon, very careful about assumption of prior knowledge, and that's a hard thing, I think, to do in SciComm. I think that's one of the trickiest things, and the ways people tend to fail most readily. I don't know if you
No, I totally agree, because it's sometimes you'll be talking about a topic that's pretty advanced, like the Hubble tension or something.
Right.
But to get to that point, you have to kind of every episode do all this preamble to explain, how do we measure galaxies and redshifts and all this kind of stuff. And so for someone who's really clued in, that part's frustrating. For that first 5 minutes, they're just like, oh, wait, why have I got to hear this for the 100th time?
Right.
But you're also trying to make it accessible to people who are discovering this topic for the first time. So that balance is often quite hard. Like, how much do you preload it or kind of speed run the preamble that you need to get to?
We speed run, yeah. Exactly right.
But you have so many episodes now, I guess you can just sort of reference.
But people aren't
well.
going to go back to those to watch them. It's like, if you want to understand this, you have to watch these 5 episodes. I mean, we became known for referencing prior episodes.
Yeah, you do that,
everything. But
people don't.
We don't expect them to, and so the idea is really like, okay, so it's there if you want it, but we try to give enough so that the major point that we reach, you can appreciate it. And we also feel that there are multiple ways to consume, any media, but you can watch an episode of Spacetime and get every point and every beat and walk away with some more technical understanding, but you can sort of kind of multi-thread an episode. So there's a way to consume it where there's a narrative that you follow and appreciate and come away with some, at least meaningful understanding of the point. But there's also some, divergences that are just nice science words that you don't need to follow. But they're atmospheric if you do it right.
No, you're totally. I think some folks actually really enjoy seeing stuff that goes beyond what they can actually comprehend, because it's almost sort of seeing the limits of how extreme physics can get, and they kind of, there's almost like a entertainment level and just seeing what does that look like, just out of curiosity, what does it look like when someone goes super deep into a topic. And you kind of get flirtations of that in the videos. And sometimes I'll just go watch like Ed Witten lecture on string theory on YouTube or something, and you like, wow, this is what it really looks like at that top level. And it's intriguing.
I mean, I see this in your show too. I get a sense of this watching Cool Worlds, that there's people want this like peek behind the curtain at what scientists really do, what science really feels like, and as long as you don't rely on them getting fully grokking the aspect of an episode to walk away with anything, then I think it's great to add that. I think it gives it some authenticity.
Yeah.
and doesn't. And I think there's a chance that for overly simplified stuff, for people to walk away with a fake sense of understanding.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of, I mean, one thing I want to ask you about is how YouTube and science communication has changed. And in terms of that sort of fakeness, there's so much like AI generated content now. It's just complete clickbait gaming. I mean, Kyle Hill did a great video. I think I referenced it in my last video, and he called it sort of science spam, I think, on YouTube. There's just a lot of that. And a lot of people in my comments will say, I'm so glad to see not AI generated slop. You see that comment a lot, because I think the audience is getting frustrated with this kind of low level facade of science, but not the real meat. So that's one aspect I see that's changing. But more broadly, yeah, you've been in this game for a while. What have you seen change in terms of how science communication is happening on YouTube?
Well, I see a lot of really good, new, authentic stuff. I mean, some of it not even new now. I mean, your own podcast. Kyle Hill is great. Dr. Becky. So there's some really awesome Anton Petrov people who are like they're just they're not there to make some highly polished and digestible cotton candy science product. They're there to really to express their own passion and enthusiasm, and so that grew over the last 10 years. There's more of that than there
So
was
the
when we started.
authenticity of the almost a personality based type science communication style, right? Where you really feel like you see this same person over and over again. You almost build a relationship with that presenter.
Right.
Whereas maybe with a channel like Kurzgewagt, you don't really see the face behind that. So it's extremely, it's that high end polished version, and then you've got maybe like Cool Worlds, which is just me in front of a camera, and then you've got maybe you that's sort of in between that has a bit of a balance of both of those worlds.
Yeah. I mean, but all of these things are good. Like Kurzgesagt is amazing for it's the best representation at that end of the spectrum. But there is a lot of slop. There's a lot of essentially reading a Wikipedia page with
get an AI voice to read
with
it
some
out.
B-roll,
Right.
and that's what's the point? Like what are you doing? You're getting some YouTube ad revenue. What is your game in this life? If that's that's I feel like, I don't know, personally, you got to do something that means something, I guess.
Yeah. And do you think that the quality then has almost bifurcated, that you've got some channels hopefully doing it really well, and then maybe like a tier of channels which are just sort of really there to farm out clicks?
For sure. And it's only going to get worse. I mean, of course, it's now we're so early in the AI era that now we can spot this stuff, but for how long will we be able to spot this stuff? It's going to be messy, I think.
Yeah, I mean, seeing there could be PBS Spacetime clone channels that are just recycling you, right? Even your physical likeness.
Plenty of training data.
Yeah, right. At this point, there's plenty. So that's certainly changed quite a bit. And then I guess also the thing that's changing is the emphasis on shorts, because it seemed that YouTube back in the day was really focused on sub 10-minute videos, and that kind of hurt you if you went too long. As you said at the beginning of PBS, you had that with Gabe's 10 years ago when Gabe was starting. But then it kind of, the algorithm changed, and it started to promote view time, like how long you actually stay viewing a video for. So I feel like that's when we actually did so well during COVID. We had this explosion in viewership because we were making 30-minute videos, and people would, maybe they didn't stay to the end, but even if they watched 15 minutes of it, that still like gives a huge signal to YouTube that this is a content to promote. But now it seems like YouTube and TikTok and Instagram, they're all trying to push these reels, these kind of short format. Have you experimented with that too much? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Not at all, actually. We felt a little guilty for not doing it because everyone was cutting out bits of their episodes or making special shorts. But one thing people don't realize is you earn nothing from shorts.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a trailer.
They're not ad served. They're trailers to direct people to the videos. And I guess we were doing fine. And so it just seemed like more work. and we didn't know what the point was, except, to spend more time living in the algorithm, which we did not elect to do, maybe to our detriment.
And what about going the other direction? Because, this is the Cool Worlds podcast, there's the Cool Worlds main channel.
Yeah.
So we're two separate channels. Have you thought about doing something in that direction, getting more long form
Well, we did a little
conversations?
bit. We did a couple of longer things. So we've done AMAs on the main channel.
Yeah, I've seen some of those.
We've done a couple of panel things, and they tend to actually mess up the algorithm unless people really stick around. So the AMAs, they're so rambling that it's hard to keep people engaged for that amount of time. And so we did find we got a huge dip.
It's a different audience. I think that's I was tempted to put the podcast on the same channel, but that's why I didn't. I was worried about it disrupting the algorithm. So I just thought I'll just start over again. Start a whole
you
new
were right.
thing.
Yeah. We had to fight for a few months to get back to where we were after one AMA.
Wow.
So now we are doing longer form stuff. We're doing something like this, actually, an interview series that we do. First of all, we do it live streamed for our Patreon subscribers, donors. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
And so we do it live, and they can ask questions, and that's been really fun so far. And then we post it, but we post it unlisted. Okay, so it's not, and then it doesn't ding the algorithm if it's unlisted.
Okay.
And so once a month we're releasing these. We've so far.
So how do people find it if it's unlisted? You have to be a Patreon.
We have to point, we point to it from the main episode.
And a community post.
Yeah,
or
we say
something.
go to the community post to see this thing. So that's our way around it.
We'll be right back after this short message. Science is all about understanding the world better, but I, for one, am often embarrassed by just how little I know about what is happening to my personal information online. Frankly, we all need a little bit of help to figure out where our data is going, and that is where our friends and sponsor of this episode come in, that is Incogni. So look, we all know this. Staying safe online has never been more important than it is today. We live in an era where AI companies are literally scraping the entire internet. We live in a world where there are data brokers who are harvesting your personal data and selling it on beyond your control. Private data like your address, your telephone number, employment history, medical history, and much, much more. So that's why I'm relieved to have Incogni protect me as well as the rest of my family. They hunt down your personal information online and then use the full weight of the law to make sure that information gets deleted. So to see this, when I log in to the incogni.com dashboard, I can see that over 1,200 data removal requests have been successfully completed thanks to Incogni. And all in all, this has saved me about 1,000 hours of my own time. The new custom removals feature is particularly powerful. You just paste in a link to a website where you found your name or data, and Incogni will take care of the rest for you. So to fight back, enroll in their protection plan at incogni.com/coolworldspodcast for an exclusive deal of 60% off using my code coolworldspodcast. You won't find a better deal online, and there's a 30-day money-back guarantee. Once again, that's incogni.com/coolworldspodcast and use the code coolworldspodcast. Now, back to the episode. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about science. And I guess, one of the questions is how you actually still manage to do so much science given your day job as a PBS Spacetime presenter. But let's talk about science for a minute, because there's something happening this week that's pretty exciting, which is Ruben is giving us our first images from the sky. And your area of expertise is thinking about sort of galactic evolution, quasars, active galactic nuclei. Obviously, you were talking about your work you did here with David when you were a postdoc. And so I've read that Ruben's going to really be pretty game-changing for this, that you can expect something like 10 million new AGNs to be discovered. That is such a vast number. I think my curiosity is, what does this huge data set, this huge catalog, how does it move the needle? What questions is that answering that are not accessible beforehand?
Yeah, I mean, it is going to be pretty amazing. It's so it's this number of objects, so the scale, these millions of quasars, but also the very particular case that I've spent a lot of my time on is the gravitationally lensed quasar. Okay, where you have by chance an intervening galaxy along the line of sight between you and the quasar, and so you actually see multiple images of the quasar.
So maybe we actually, just to make everyone's on the same page, can you describe first what a quasar is?
Sure. Well, first let me answer the question, and then I'll before I totally forget that question. So these very special objects that I will just explain to you in just a second, we'll find several thousand of those, and for my entire career we've been dealing with like 100, the same 100
lensed quasars.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so very special objects, and so more objects, but the real breakthrough with that Rubin LSST will give us is the time dimension. So normally you take a photograph, you have to point your telescope at something faint for a long time and you get this spectrum or this image. But Rubin will do that for the entire southern sky every 3 days. And so we'll see how things change. We tend to think of the universe as a kind of static place, very stately, things moving slowly, but that's not the case. In some places it's very violent and changes on rapid timescales.
So the lensing geometry obviously isn't changing on that timescale, but or is it? But I would expect it's mostly the variability of the AGN of the quasar itself.
I'll come to it. There is an aspect of the lensing geometry that changes that's very important too. And so watching anything changeable for 10 years, and so we get this long baseline of variability, multiple different parts of the electromagnetic spectrum visible, and for a crazy number of objects. So it's it's going to be groundbreaking, but it's also an enormous data problem. Like how do you deal with all this data? And so my work has been coming up with approaches to prepare for the influx of data, in particular from quasars and lensed quasars.
So quasars, let's just backtrack. Yeah, tell us about what exactly a quasar is, and what are the models that you're developing? What exactly are they trying to extract from them?
Okay, so the quasar from quasi-stellar radio source we now know the supermassive black holes in the centers of galaxies. Every galaxy has one of these supermassive black holes, millions to billions of suns worth of mass. Normally quiet. The Milky Way zone, SMBH, is quiet, but sometimes something happens, gas gets pushed to the center of the galaxy, it ends up falling into a whirlpool, an accretion disk, spilling into the black hole, where it heats just through friction, turning this gravitational potential energy into heat, and they radiate, and they can radiate 1,000 times brighter than the galaxy that they're in, even though they're small. The galaxy is hundreds of billions of stars, solar systems. This thing is the size of a single solar system in the very center of a galaxy. But we see them to the ends of the universe. They're that bright. Like the heat glow of this accretion disk is just insane. When we first saw these things in the surveys we were doing of the sky in the early part of the 19th century, 20th century, there were these points of light with a radio blob around them, and we had no idea what they were.
So they're outshining their galaxies in some cases.
Vastly outshining their galaxies in most cases. When you can see the accretion disk, they very much are. And all sorts of violent processes are going. You've got the whirlpool of the accretion disk, then you've got gas being blasted out, orbiting around, producing all sorts of different, observable signatures in this point of light. And when you take the spectrum of the point of light, you see this heat glow, but you see these gigantic emission lines from different atoms that are being ionized and moving at massive speeds. So you've got this crazy Doppler broadening. These were very confusing, and they're also very far away, so they're reddened by the expanding universe. And because of their very great distance, they're very difficult to study. There's no telescope that we can build that for which a quasar is, larger than a single pixel.
So what's been the workhorse prior to Rubin for finding, say, the lensed quasars?
A lot of luck, honestly. We've been surveying the sky since we've built telescopes, and occasionally we find these weird cases where, so the quasars you see because they look like stars, but the spectrum is weird. But the lensed quasars, one way to find them is that you see a pair of quasars that are too close, or even four quasars that are too close, and you look at them and you see it's the same quasar, viewed through these different paths through space, bent by this intervening galaxy.
So kind of like the Einstein cross, like the famous,
Exactly,
where you get
right.
duplicate images.
Yeah, the four. That's a very famous one.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them now. The main way we try to understand them is just try to come up with models for what could produce the spectrum, what could produce this type of thermal radiation, these types of, atomic emission lines with these, moving at, maybe 10% the speed of light.
Yeah.
This gas, and eventually we
you
realize
want to understand the physics is the extreme physics of this environment.
That's definitely a goal.
Yeah.
But you can't take a picture of it. Except in a couple of sort of analog cases, which are much closer, but for the full-blown quasar, you can't do it. One thing you can do is, so these things are also, they're violent, and so they fluctuate. The fueling changes, and so you see kind of fluctuations reverberate, echo through this structure, and that is reflected in the way the spectrum changes. Okay, so you see some parts change first, like typically the ultraviolet or the blue part, or X-ray if you have it, if you're lucky, of the thermal emission of the accretion disk, and then the redder parts, and then this fast-moving gas changes, and so you can sort of figure out this map of the inner structure by looking at how light echoes through these structures.
So cool.
So that's reverberation mapping.
Yeah.
And that's been one of the most powerful ways to validate our models for this structure. I mean, the models, like, amazingly, they existed before we even started doing that, because it seemed like this is the only way you could generate that much energy in that smaller space, is with this supermassive.
So it's reverberating off the accretion disk, and
so it's, we don't even know exactly, but it's a central-ish point source of variability, like a flare or an increase in fueling that results in some, very stochastic, like, think about, the stock market. It's like they're very stochastic, but you see, if you look at different parts of the spectrum, that same pattern of variability, which is sourced presumably near the center of the quasar, then spreads outwards, heats the disk, influences the orbiting gas, and so their brightness changes on different time scales. And so you can map the relative time scales that way. And this is one thing that Rubin will do. Like, it's very expensive to monitor these things for long periods of time, like just point a telescope at it. But because of the enormous field of view of Rubin, it's able to do the whole sky. And so over 10 years, we'll watch the reverberation of millions of quasars and build a much more, I guess, detailed and expressive map of what the insides of these look like. And then we have the very special case of the lensed quasars.
Yeah, why are they so of such import to you personally? What makes them extra interesting?
So there's a number of really cool things you can do with them. So one is that they give you an independent way to map that structure, the inner structure of the quasar, and that comes from a time variable part of the lensing. So the quasar and the lensing galaxy. So me, my telescope, and some big galaxy, and then some much more distant quasar, and we have these paths of light that get bent around. That doesn't change. Okay, so everything is moving, but slowly enough, and these things are big enough that the configuration doesn't change. But the lens itself it's a pretty crappy lens. It's made up of stars. Okay, it's not some smooth glass or anything, and dark matter and all this stuff. And the path of light that comes from the quasar to us passes through a stellar field, and the the overall lensing effect is the sum of the gravitational fields of all of the stars, all of the dark matter. But the each path experiences the gravitational fields of the individual stars, and
which are moving,
well, the stars are moving, but also there is a relative motion of the lens, which, although it doesn't cause a major change, it causes that path of light to pass across through a different stellar fields,
right.
so the local stars.
And these lensing events are often very sensitive to these just small nudges,
exactly
right?
Yeah. And more importantly, the effect of the gravitational field of individual stars on the quasar is kind of resolved down to the scale of the supermassive black hole. So you have so each star produces its own magnification effect, but if you get the alignment just right between some stars in the lensing galaxy, then you can actually have a huge increase in the magnification of the distant quasar. But that magnification increase, it's, I mean, for example, it can look like a high magnification band that sweeps across the accretion disk. So you can imagine an accretion disk, and this band of high magnification sweeps across, kind of like, those radar bleep, bleep, bleep. So you can, and then you see different parts of the accretion disk magnified at different times, or the emission.
So it's almost like you're doing like kind of topography, then you're kind of sliding along, getting insights.
Exactly. Yeah. And so this is an independent way to reconstruct that inner structure.
Yeah.
And so I've done this, on and off for some years, but always individual cases. It's hard to do. The monitoring's hard. You can learn some things just from just taking a photograph, and we've done this with the Hubble Space Telescope in I think useful ways to get some constraints on the physics of the accretion disk. But what you really want is a lot of objects and just long time series, so you can see many of these events, and you can slowly build up this just kind of more coherent model.
But you won't have the obviously Rubin's primarily in the visible, goes a little bit into the red, but the you won't have that ultraviolet or X-ray,
right?
Especially because those missions like Chandra and XMM are kind of coming towards the end of their lives, and the funding situation doesn't look great for those. So how much are you hurt by the lack of any kind of planned X-ray? I mean, links with this project that people were hoping to get funded could be like this super great observatory to do X-ray astronomy, but doesn't look like there's anything on the cards that I'm aware of to do that.
The X-ray thing's a real shame. As you get closer to the black hole, the processes get more energetic, and so when you're very close to the black hole, things are emitting X-rays, and things are even X-ray hot, and so some of our best understanding about the nature of these supermassive black holes is X-ray observations, where we really see this material like a close to the event horizon of the black hole. It's really, and you can see these powerful relativistic effects of gas moving at these crazy speeds in these insane gravitational fields. I mean, it's really incredible. But X-ray astronomy is hard and
it's the most extreme laboratory in the universe, pretty much, right?
Really, it really is. It's incredible. So the golden experiment with lensed quasars, and this process of stars magnifying, it's called microlensing, by the way. The golden microlensing experiment is watching a very clean, high magnification band cross the inner region of an accretion disk, where you expect there to be a shadow around the location of the black hole. So everyone's seen the Event Horizon Telescope picture of the black hole, which incredible feat, and we have it now for 2 black holes. But if we can do this, if you can monitor the passage of one of these high magnification bands across this black hole shadow, then you can do the same thing potentially for thousands.
Wow.
And so
it's a bit more indirect. You're kind of reconstructing it.
It is more indirect. I mean, if you can do it in X-ray, then you're getting pretty.
Yeah.
I mean, so EHT was radio. So yes, it's in some ways it's more direct. It's a picture of a black hole, which is a wild thing. But the advantage of doing this microlensing method is that you're not restricted by waveband. You can, if we had an X-ray telescope, we could use Rubin to monitor, predict when these things are happening, and then turn on, all the other telescopes to watch the crossing. And we'd learn a lot.
That'd be wonderful. Yeah. So definitely something exciting to look forward to with these, with Rubin, and I guess also with Roman, because that's going to be doing microlensing as well. Is that helping a lot with the science?
Yeah, I mean, there's a suite of things to look forward Euclid to, also is important. It's, I mean,
lots of uncertainties ahead.
There's a lot of collaboration between Euclid and LSST Rubin, and so I mean, Euclid brings some really important, things that like the resolution, for example. So, I mean, to do all of this, you have to build these models of the whole lensing system, and you have to model the hell out of it, and that's a huge data challenge, a huge technical challenge. But Euclid is powerful because the resolution is so much better being a space telescope that you can understand the gravitational field of the lens in a much more precise way.
So quasars and distant galaxies were kind of taken over YouTube world about a year or two ago, when James Webb was releasing these images of galaxies with apparently redshifts that were in contradiction with not necessarily lambda CDM or the Big Bang model, but they were in contradiction with our ideas of how fast galaxies could grow. So there were a lot of clickbaity, we talked about clickbait earlier, there's a lot of clickbaity headlines at the time saying JWST proves Big Bang is wrong, this kind of stuff out there. It's been, and obviously this is much closer to your wheelhouse than my wheelhouse, so I want to hear your retrospective view on this a little bit. What was the resolution looking back from that apparent point of tension in the models? Have we resolved that now, or is there, after all said and done, there's still a real problem that we're working on?
Yeah, so I mean, the galaxy evolution stuff is not as close to my wheelhouse as it maybe once was, and so I followed it, not as an active researcher in the field, but my sense is that it made us have to, all right, the Big Bang Theory could be wrong, the universe could be twice as old. That's an extreme move. And you would be making that move in order to save our current models of galaxy evolution. The other move you could make is update our models of galaxy evolution, which seems like the less extreme thing to do. And, I think the reason it made media is because they were surprising results. But these aren't new. There's a lot of... So one reason to study quasars is to understand how these black holes grow and their relationship to, the evolution of galaxies, how important they are in the formation of structure in the universe, and the answer is they are important, but there are similar mysteries in the study of black hole growth. For example, JWST made it worse, but we were seeing these gigantic supermassive black holes from within the first billion years of the universe's life. The old idea and the intuitive idea is that, all right, you start a universe, it has nothing, you make some stars, some of those stars are big enough to make black holes, and those black holes grow over time. Some of them merge and they trickle towards the center of galaxies. You get a big black hole in the center of a galaxy. That makes perfect sense, but it should take time. There's a limit to how fast a black hole can grow. There's a limit to how fast you can cram gas down this very narrow funnel to grow the black hole. And so
the more you try to shove it in, the hotter that accretion disk gets, and it's pushing stuff back out again.
The Eddington limit. And even just getting rid of the angular momentum, so orbiting things can fall in, is a challenge. And so we were seeing these billion even in one case, 10 billion solar mass black holes from within the first several 100 million years of the universe's life. The models could not explain them. But there are now models that can. They're not what we expect, and we don't know which one's right, but there are various ways to start black holes bigger. And I think the same is true of the galaxies. How do you make old-looking galaxies that early? Well, you have to get a little more creative, I guess. But
yeah, it's an exciting time to be working on that topic, though, because I think we always love it as scientists when something challenges the status quo of how we thought something worked, and then new data is like, no, you have to go back to the scratch. And I feel that same way with like the discovery of mini Neptunes was kind of shocking in exoplanets. Like we just didn't expect a planet like that, but it didn't mean that all of physics was somehow wrong. It's just that we didn't expect this to be possible. But yeah, when we think about it harder, you can figure it out after the fact.
Yeah, and I think one issue is that if people who are inclined to throwing away the book and starting from scratch will point to this reluctance from scientists to do that as a sign that they are stuck in their ways and that they won't follow the evidence. And it couldn't be further from the truth. I think any of us would be excited to lead some revolutionary study, but we also know that if we follow the most extreme interpretation of any new result, then we are chasing our tails most of the time. So we have to balance these things. And sure, there could be things that are hugely wrong with the standard lambda CDM. I mean, the DESI indication of changing dark energy tells us just that we do have to keep questioning the beginning, the foundations, but we shouldn't tear them down each time we get a new result, because that's not how you make scientific progress.
Yeah, this episode of people questioning Big Bang because of the James Webb results, I think it kind of speaks to a darker undercurrent that's happening more broadly. It's not just limited to that one case. I feel there is a growing distrust in really the integrity of scientists. A lot of people feel this way. I think it's becoming more and more common. And so you look at sort of the string theory has become under particular scrutiny and attack for this. But as we said, lambda CDM with DESI and JWST, the standard model of particle physics has had its fair share of controversies in this sense as well. And so there is sort of this narrative that is being spoken about in some circles, that scientists are acting dishonestly to try and almost perpetuate a field for the sake of a field, just to sort of keep us all on a job or something, I guess. So obviously we probably disagree about that being a true statement, but maybe we could just linger on it for a second. Why do you think this is emerging? Why is this narrative starting to grow traction? And maybe what, as science communicators, can we do to quell this concern?
Yeah, there's a lot here, obviously. So I think the core phenomenon is connected to our inclination to personify groups, like to imagine, for example, that when you talk about scientists as a collective,
like a monolith,
and as having a collective intent, that's clearly a bad model. Okay, like there can be some emergent collective, momentum in what's and there's also certainly, collectively agreed upon ideas and goals within any group, but the idea that scientists are trying to do this or that is, it's a crappy model. I think it's a little bit inevitable because of how specialized every science has become. It's increasingly difficult for even one scientist to fully appreciate or partially appreciate the field of a different scientist, even within the same broad field. That for a non-scientist to, just know enough to appreciate what a given field is about. And so you automatically have this kind of factionalization of these groups. And, we see it also, this is a dynamic in all parts of society, a splitting, okay, in the same way that a star-forming cloud might break apart as it collapses into many stars, okay. The
Self-gravity pulls these bodies apart.
Exactly. And so at some point, it becomes too difficult to understand what one group is doing, and so you end up developing these heuristics for them. You model them as an entity, and science is particularly susceptible because it is hard, and it involves a lot of knowledge, and and so it's very susceptible to people just wanting to develop these simple heuristics. So I mean that's like I think the core psychological dynamic at work here. But what it's always been the case. But why now? I mean, it used to be that in the golden era of moon travel, and science was seen as this the leading edge of humanity's movement into the future. But that no longer seems to be the case. I think we lost that that dream a little bit. This was sort of the dream that I sort of saw growing up. There was this sense of this beautiful momentum towards a perfect future. I think when it became clear that was not going to be the case, okay, it's that it was going to be at best very staggered. I think science lost a bit of status, and maybe that made it more susceptible to being typecast and yeah, I don't know. I think an individual scientist can't do a lot, but what we can do is, I think, speak authentically. I think what we try to do is to not talk down, to respect the intelligence of those we're talking to. I think that's also a part of it. I think scientists can seem pretty snobby. I think because it is hard to communicate this stuff, and so we are as susceptible as this gravitational insularization as anyone else. We want to just talk jargon to other scientists, and remembering what the cognitive path is from a non-scientist to a scientist takes a lot of energy.
Yeah, I kind of wonder. There's some aspects where I kind of understand why the public would be so resistant to. I mean, think about COVID and climate change, because though the implications of the science affect people's lives, it has implications on mask mandates or vaccines or carbon footprint, things like it, that actually impacts your life in a very real way. So I totally understand why those became topics that the public felt they had an important voice to contribute to.
Like someone you already see as an out group, you now see as trying to tell you how to live your life.
Right.
Can't go down well.
But what's odd with astronomy, like with physics, like fundamental physics, like string theory has nothing to do with anyone's lives. So it's kind of surprising that it's become so targeted as this kind of crisis. But maybe it just kind of stems from once you've kind of cracked open the shell, it all kind of falls out beneath, and physics just kind of comes in for the ride. But I do worry, whether what we're doing on YouTube and social media are we ultimately somehow, not me and you personally, but is this movement of trying to communicate science in these platforms maybe the reason why this has garnered so much attention and become such a big topic? Is the effectiveness of social media effective also in promoting these kind of conspiratorial
For
views.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that is down to individual communicators. And, I think we all know some of the people who are promoting some of these views. Yeah. I mean, so I think we're all very flawed creatures. Scientists are very flawed creatures. I think we start out with an ideal, and it's a powerful and authentic ideal. Like we're playing a true game, and we're really interested in truth and so on. But we get stuck in the game of academia. We have to pay bills um, and get a position, and so we can all get sucked into that game. And I think it's easy to spin a story that's all that scientists are doing, that we're paper factories, and we only care about tenure. But it's also true in the science communication, definitely in the YouTube world, is we want to make authentic videos, but the videos have to be watched.
Yeah.
And so we're working against an algorithm. Okay. And, so I think our content is not particularly clickbait, but our thumbnails sure are sometimes.
Yeah.
And so there is a bit of a balance you have to strike. And I think there are some of us who don't get that balance, at the right level. And it's, I don't know, attention is addictive.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about that recently. I had an AMA with some of the for a 1 million subscriber video, and someone asked me about the balance of sensationalism, and with clickbait and with thumbnails and titles and videos, it's always in my mind. Veritas did a great video, a couple of videos about this, and he's spoken about how it is unfortunate that the algorithm kind of promotes this, but it's outrageously effective to clickbait. And so there is an argument that one could make that as scientists, we should maybe, as communicators, we should be maybe okay with having juicy hooks on the clickbaity side of things, because once you bring them in, then you can kind of do real science communication.
Sure.
But if they don't click the video, how do you get them in? So there is, personally, I'm always trying to find as far as I can go without feeling uncomfortable with it. But it's a very delicate balance to walk. Do you feel the same way with your videos?
Yeah. And I've had fights with my producer about where that line is.
Yeah.
He's more driven. I mean, it's his job to be more driven by these metrics. Clicks and viewership, and I am blessedly a little bit shielded from that, and so I don't know. It turns out that it's a complex world, and that simple heuristics aren't enough to be an adult in this world. And I think this is just one little part of that. I think we want to find a place to stand our ground and not move from it, but I don't think we have that luxury in a complex world.
Well, I think all of this just goes to show that both with YouTube communicators and with scientists, there is no monolith. We all are very diverse and different and have different views on the right way to communicate things and the things to focus on and how far to take these topics. So there is the idea that I think we're all in a conspiracy, a cabal that's sort of having secret meetings and, we should all, say that this is true just to keep things. I think that definitely seems a stretch to me because of just my own experience as a scientist. But I do think it's also important that we as scientists acknowledge and openly talk about these issues that, for sure, it can be hard as a junior scientist to, the ideal is that anyone, whether you're a grad student or a postdoc, should be able to write a paper that shreds to pieces any of the claim out there. It shouldn't matter about rank. But it is fair to say that if you piss someone off, and I've done it with YouTube, I talked about that in my AMA as well. I've had a video where I criticized a paper in my Cool Wars video, and the person who was criticized was a senior academic, and they wrote me a very angry email and made various threats against me professionally.
Oh, wow.
And I had to delete that section of the video in the end to appease them because it was before I had tenure, and I felt very. Yeah, I felt like that was very unfair, you know, and this was to me the academic system failing, that I'm supposed to be able to criticize whoever I want, and just the fact I was doing it on YouTube meant I do have a big voice. I have to acknowledge that, and so I think from his perspective, it felt like I was sort of punching down. But in terms of the actual power balance of academic positions, I felt it was the other way around, that he was punching down on me. So I kind of wonder, have you ever encountered that tension of your academic colleagues getting either frustrated or celebrating, or, you know, trying to nudge you to say certain things, or getting annoyed if you say certain things? Has that been a problem for you?
Nothing like that. Nothing like what you experienced. I've had people email to point out when we're wrong, and you know, we typically issue corrections when, you know, when indeed we are wrong. Happens now and then, but nothing that's bled over into my professional world. I think I know I've steered away a little bit from gravitationally lensed quasars and so on, in a way that, yeah. No, your experience sounds a little bit unique.
Yeah, I guess it's something that emerging science communicators, if we're encouraging junior scientists to get involved in science communication, and some of them will be successful, and some of them will get an audience. It is a double-edged sword, I think, in that sense, that yes, it's great because you have this sort of second job that it gives you some financial independence and security, and you have a voice, which of course you'll want to be heard. That's kind of, you know, the point of writing a paper, is that someone's going to read it and hear what you're saying. But it also comes with this sort of expectation of greater and greater responsibility the bigger your audience is. And I know when I was first doing videos, there was much more joy sometimes in knowing that no one was watching, right? Because you could speak on whatever you wanted. You could choose whatever crazy topic you wanted because you were interested in it. It was just for the sake of it, and you weren't really playing to the algorithm, or you could be maybe a little bit more speculative in your videos. But I think once you've got a big audience, there is this onus and responsibility to do really, really tight job on it, and you know your colleagues are watching, and that's always very strange to me, to think that my colleagues are watching. I always just imagine I'm speaking not to my colleagues, but they are watching clearly, and so it's does that ever get in your head then, sort of thinking about academics?
I mean, the thing I said about, you know, an important, you know, guiding star being, am I going to be embarrassed? So for me, I think it's a plus that I'm thinking about these people watching. I think it keeps us honest. In terms of the freedom of being able to just put stuff out there without that sort of check, I don't know, I guess our stuff, just by style, we try to be journalistic at some level. So I try not to put too many personal opinions. I think the personal opinions are in what I choose to cover, and you know, some of it bleeds over for sure. You know, there's this current series we're doing on naturalness and the hierarchy problem, just, you know, connected to the crisis in physics, which isn't really a crisis. The fact that we're doing it, I think, implies my thoughts, and I'm, you know, arguing why, you know, in fact, the physicists are not completely deluded in worrying about naturalness and the Higgs mass and all this stuff. But at the same time, the actual episodes, you know, there's no soapbox. I try not to make explicit statements about whether I think one view is correct and one isn't. So maybe we're shielded a little bit in that sense, that we don't piss people off too much.
Mm-hmm.
Piss some people off, but not too
If you're
much.
not pissing some people off, you're not doing it right, probably.
Yeah. Yeah. So far, I haven't pissed people off who could impede my academic career, but, you know,
Yeah.
it could still happen.
Yeah. Well,
Maybe
that's the joy of having tenure, I guess, is it get past that branch. So I think we mostly hit. I was actually mostly a question from one of my donors who was asking about the balance between research and public outreach. So,
Right.
yeah, it sounds like we've covered a lot of that, and it's definitely something that's hard to navigate. But I wanted to maybe finish by asking you about advice you have for people who are starting as, especially science communicators. If you were to restart over now, you're a grad student or a postdoc and you're thinking of starting your first whatever podcast, Twitter account, TikTok, whatever it is, YouTube, what are the things that you think are missing in the landscape of science communication? Where do we need to do a better job? Where would you like to see more voices contributing, and what kind of style of communication things do you think are missing out there?
I mean, it's a hard thing to do. So I don't think I'm going to be able to tell anyone what to do to start a successful career.
I feel we talked about this earlier. It's hard to tell someone just do this and you will be successful.
Yeah.
There's no recipe like that.
I think there's some meta advice that might be the most useful. I mean, I would say consume a lot of media across these platforms. So understand the landscape. Don't just say, I want to make a YouTube show with such and such. Like really get a sense of the landscape, and understand where. So I think it's down. That's the first task is to
like read the literature before you write a paper.
Yeah,
in
read the
science,
literature, know what's out there, know how people are doing things, and I feel like then it can just come to you. I mean, like then you can. It also will tell you what you like. So I think super important is do something that you want to do. Otherwise, you just won't proceed, and the inauthenticity will just bleed through the screen. I think you need to consume media. You need to become a fan. You need to see what will be fun for you to do, and definitely don't do it to become a popular YouTuber. Do it because it will bring you joy, and also because you see a need. Do it for the product itself, not because of how you think that product will then reflect on you and blah blah blah. And there needs to be some really base level authenticity to what you're doing and why you're doing it. So what do you want to do? What is useful to be out there? Is there a good reason for this thing to be out there? And then, so I think these are some of the attitudes you go in with, and know the landscape, know what you like, be a fan, and then I think you can probably trust your intuition to land on something awesome.
Yeah.
And then just make it. I think you can't strategize too hard around how you get started. I think get a camera and make stuff. And I think understand that you are going to be, this little. When I was in doing my PhD, I wrote a piece of software to search a landscape for an optimal model. It was like just a chi-squared space, and I built this slightly different little simplex, which is a multi-dimensional 3-point.
I've written
object.
one of those myself.
Yeah. Right. And there are different ways to do it. One is it puts these 3 points down in whatever parameter space you're in and finds where the direction of the gradient, and then it walks, and then it does it again and walks. So it walks around this very local. So there's this very local little object that explores the gradient locally and then finds a minimum. And then, if you have this complex space where maybe the local best solution isn't the real best solution, you can do other things. Like I think in the end, it found the gradient and then it projected a parabola in that direction. And so it was much faster at finding the local. And there were steps to break it out of local minima. And so I find it useful to think about myself as that little valley walker, always I interact with the world, but certainly in finding some way to do a creative thing it is this vastly complex space, and you're landing in it in this single place, and your job is to find where in this landscape you want to be. And so,
So can I ask on that analogy then, and sort of ask about your own aspirations and maybe stretch goals for your own work as a science communicator. Yeah, because with any, I feel this with Cool Worlds, that you kind of have this localization, optimization. You're feeding back from your audience. You're kind of listening to what they enjoy, and they'll tell you, and you can kind of dial in more and more to sort of the content they want. But in a way that can be a little bit constraining, because now you don't know if there's another solution space over here that you're missing, because you're just so iterating on that, on the nuance there.
yeah, and it's a hard thing. Like you know that, oh, there could be something even better. Grass is greener in the other deeper minimum of the
Right.
creative
Yeah, you can't
landscape.
experiment as much, maybe, I guess is the point. When you're first starting out, there's a freedom maybe to experiment, but once you've done this for a while, if you start experimenting, you're going to piss people off. And you talked about that earlier with when you did this kind of longer form kind of
Right.
quasi podcast stuff, the algorithm
Got pissed
punished
off.
you for it, for doing it, right? So yeah, have you thought about doing something different to PBS? Are you interested, or do you have an aspiration or a goal to try something more ambitious or in a different walk and somehow? Yeah.
Too many, unfortunately, is the problem. So with PBS Spacetime, we have many ideas to grow the show and to try different things with the show, and I won't say anything now because we're going to try a series of experiments.
Oh,
let's
that
just
sounds
say.
exciting.
Yeah, and we're going to explore the landscape, walk around it a little bit, and find new ways to do what we do, and
Great.
keeping our DNA intact.
Yeah.
But there are other things. So we're making a film, and we crowdfunded that film. The film's working title is Inventing Reality, and it is an exploration of sort of kind of what I just described, but how humans try to understand the world using physics as the vehicle in the film to talk about how we do that, and the crisis in physics. But really, it's a much broader exploration of how we understand the world and what the final destination might be. And this has been a project that we've been working on for quite some time. The crowdfunding was a while ago. We have some amazing interviews with some really leading physicists, and we just got back from Helgoland, which is this barren little island off the north coast of Germany where Werner Heisenberg had his epiphany that led to matrix mechanics, the first complete formulation of quantum mechanics, almost exactly 100 years ago. And so there was a workshop there last week, and we went there with cameras and filmed some really cool stuff.
I'm jealous. That sounds fun.
That's part of the film also. So that's a slightly slow roll process, but it's really coming together. We're nearly ready to start animating it. And that's occupied, I guess, I wish I had more hours in the day.
I don't know how you do what you do with the hours you have. It's amazing.
Nights and weekends.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there are books I need to write, and I don't know. I mean, I'm the research project I'm working on now. The grant is a 5-year grant, and we're at year 3.5, and so that feels like it. It
urgency.
Has the momentum to. I mean, there's certainly urgency to really bring it home.
Yeah.
But we're gonna bring it home, and we have that momentum now, and my role is now going to be to make sure the real heroes of that project have what they need to see it home, and so with that kind of in this fairly settled state, I do have more time to start thinking about the books and the other things.
Great. Well, we're always hungry for more from you, Matt. So, and it's been wonderful to actually sit down with you and hear about your own journey and the science you're working on. So, thank you for coming on and telling us about all of your amazing work.
Thanks so much. I mean, we're practically neighbors, so I'm super happy to be back in.
We should do this more
Colombia.
often. Yeah.
Well, come on ours.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, great. Thank you again, Matt.
All right. Thanks, David.
So that was my conversation with Professor Matt O'Dowd from PBS Spacetime and Lehman College. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. It was really a pleasure for me to get to sit down with Matt. We've interacted a few times before. We've lobbied in DC together to try and fight for NASA missions and things like this. But to actually have a serious sit-down conversation about the ins and outs of science communication and his research was really a pleasure for me. I'm hoping to do more of these. So if there are other science communicators that you would like me to talk to, then please do let me know. As well as, of course, as I said at the top of the episode, if there are people in the UK especially you want me to talk to, that is particularly well timed because of my sabbatical here in the United Kingdom at the moment. But just to, as a final thought from this episode, I think it really goes to show what a powerful double-edged sword technology is, and especially in application of science communication, how the internet and social media is. I mean, this is something we always know. I mean, as we develop our technology, such as the nuclear bomb, it comes with a double-edged sword, right? You get the power of the atom to power your civilization through nuclear power plants, but you also gain the power of the atom to destroy. And technology always feels like that right now. And with AI, I think many of us have that same concern. AI is an extremely powerful tool to do good, but it can also be weaponized to do a great deal of harm. And in the same way, the democratization of science communication with social media is a double-edged sword. No longer do we just have Carl Sagan sat alone as maybe one or two other people as this kind of pillar of science communication. We have hundreds, thousands of science communicators online, and I'm obviously one of those. And that comes with a double-edged sword, right? Because it's great to have that diversity and different views, different perspectives come out. But there's also an algorithm. There's also a competition that emerges between these different voices. And there is inevitable temptation to sensationalize and clickbait. And obviously, we know that with YouTube, right? You see that so clearly. And we talked about that, of course, in the episode, how there are folks who are deliberately misleading often just to try and drive traffic to their channel, try and drive traffic to their podcast. And that's dangerous. We live in actually very dangerous times in that sense. So I'm enormously appreciative of folks like Matt who are fighting the good fight of trying to stick to truth and trying to fight to the limits of what we know, make it exciting and engaging. The universe is more creative than we are. It's more wild than we could ever dream. So we don't need to sensationalize it. It's already magnificent. And I think that's certainly the spirit I'm trying to capture with both the podcast and my main channel. And I think we could do with more of that online and keep fighting against these AI bots and things like this out there, because that's not going to go away. It's only going to get worse. And so I hope as science communicators, we can keep pushing on that. And I hope as listeners, you will continue to have the good judgment to seek the content which is rational and reasonable and sober and is not just dipping into that deep temptation of let's just jazz this up as much as possible for clickbait. It's always going to be a temptation. I fall for that trap sometimes as well, like anyone else. But I hope we can all try and stay sober in this complicated and difficult, messy world that we live in. So if you are enjoying my efforts to try and stay sober in this difficult and complicated world, then this is the Cool Words podcast. The one way to help us out here is, of course, to hit the likes, the shares, the subscribes, all that kind of stuff. But if you really want to become a top supporter to the Cool Worlds Lab, which is my research group at Columbia University, the best way to do that is to head to our website. So that's coolworldslab.com/support. coolworldslab.com/support. I'll put the link down below. And if you head there, you can, from the price of a coffee per month, support a real research group researching astronomy, astrophysics, the formation of planets, life in the universe, astrobiology, astrostatistics, all this wonderful stuff that I know that you find fascinating. And that money really does go to supporting actual research. So that's the best thing to do, because then the less funding proposals I have to write, the more time I can spend making these videos. So please do check that out if you're interested, coolwaslab.com/support. And so until next time, stay thoughtful and stay curious.